that one actually was something, Harry.
All right, so they have a few laughs, a little official business, the nomination of cabinet members, signing a proclamation. Dana Bash, what's going to happen next?
What's going to happen next, Wolf, is the president is going to come back from the Senate side of the Capitol, where he is now, through the center into Statuary Hall, and that is where there is going to be what is now the traditional post-inaugural lunch. As I mentioned before, it is extremely exclusive. There were 1,600 people on the platform. This is only 220 guests make this list, and it is something that really tends to bring together in a very intimate way himself, members of the leadership, House and Senate, Democrat, Republican, members of the Supreme Court. And it's so exclusive that the president himself only gets a little more than a dozen seats that he can fill with his own personal guests. So we're actually waiting and hoping to see the president once again once he moves through where we are, the Capitol Rotunda, to the lunch.
Dana, thanks very much. We're going to be making our way over to the White House, to the reviewing stand momentarily. But David Gergen, a quick thought on what the president had to say.
We've just heard one of the most important speeches Barack Obama has given as president.
Why?
It's a real declaration of conscience about principles of what he believes in. He's basically said, when I came in the first term, we had all these emergencies, we had these wars, we've now started to clear the decks, let's talk about what's essential. And he placed himself squarely in the tradition of Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln. If anything, I thought in many ways it was a response to King, his version of the March on Washington speech 50 years ago. Because it's set forward in the same way Alex started talking about this. It was a speech about equality of opportunity, that's the essential American dream, and everything else flows from that.
And it was appropriate. He did it on Martin Luther King Jr.'s day here in Washington. Absolutely. All right, all of us, we're going to head over to the reviewing stand. Anderson, we'll be in close touch with you. We should get there fairly soon.
All right, Wolf, we'll continue to hold down the coverage while you make your way to the reviewing stand, because the festivities continue as the parade will be getting underway after this lunch. Let's just play a couple of excerpts, a couple of key moments from the president's speech, because I think, as David Gergen said, this was really a very important speech. And as David Miranda said, you can really feel the president's heartbeat in this speech. Let's listen in.
We must make the hard choices to reduce the cost of health care and the size of our deficit. But we reject the belief that America must choose between caring for the generation that built this country and investing in the generation that will build its future.
Gloria, you cited that.
Yeah, I think it was the president saying, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. I'm not going to choose between generations. My generation needs to build on what the generation has done before us. And I think that doesn't only refer to Social Security or the deficit. I think it also does refer to civil rights. It refers to equality, what generations did before, what Martin Luther King did before. My generation will continue. So he spoke about civil rights. He talked about having to act about gun violence. He talked about climate change. And so it's part of this construct of, as the president used to say, the fierce urgency of now. He said, we have divided views of government, but we cannot let these century-long debates about the role of government for all time stop us from acting right now.
The fierce urgency of now is, of course, a phrase that Dr. King himself used.
Right.
Van Jones, do you agree with David Gergen that this was a speech, kind of Barack Obama, President Obama's response to Dr. King?
I felt that way, and I felt that he had an opportunity, the 50-year anniversary this year of that speech, to put his own marker down for equality, and I think that it was nailed by Alex. This was a speech about equality. I think it's also important to recognize there's a questioning of his patriotism that has gone on and some parts of the far right. This is not a patriot. He doesn't believe in real American values. He had to take those values that he believes in and put them in the context, as Dr. King did, of the best of our traditions. I thought he did an extraordinary job of situating his true beliefs in the best traditions of America. And I think that it will go down as an important moment.
And there's John Lewis, of course, legendary civil rights leader. Talking to Hillary Clinton, and
I mean, and you have that kind of history all day long today. Again, Medgar Evers' widow, whose husband was gunned down. She was supposed to be at the March on Washington to represent her husband. She couldn't get here. She got here 50 years later.
Medgar Evers, who was assassinated fighting for voting rights.
Yeah. In 1963. If I could put sort of Martin Luther King holiday and Barack Obama into the perspective of his biography, the day he was born, August 4th, 1961, 4 freedom riders were arrested in Shreveport, Louisiana, for walking into the whites-only section of the Trailways bus terminal. When he was 2, that very day, J.D. Goodman and Schwerner's bodies were found, the civil rights workers. When he was 3, the Senate gave final approval to the Civil Rights Act, which made his rise possible.
Dana Bash is standing by with John Lewis. Dana?
That's right. We are honored to have John Lewis here, who is now a member of Congress. But most importantly, I think, given this day, you were a compatriot of Martin Luther King Jr. What did it feel like to stand here on Martin Luther King holiday with a black president being inaugurated for the 2nd time?
It felt very good. Felt really moving. It was almost unreal, almost unbelievable to see President Barack Obama taking the oath with the Bible of Martin Luther King Jr. I saw him reading that Bible on many, many occasions as he traveled all over America, but especially in the American South.
You heard in the president's speech mention in one breath Selma, Stonewall, Seneca Falls. What did that mean to you?
The president was saying, in spite of our differences, in spite of all of our issues, the difficulties, that we're one people. We're one America. It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, Hispanic, Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether we're straight or gay. We're one people. We're one country. That we all live in the same house, the American house.
You have such an experience behind you at Selma. You were beaten up. Take us back in time then and put yourself back then looking forward to this day where a black president was inaugurated for a 2nd term.
Well, I did everything possible today to keep from crying. When I saw him standing there, taking the oath with the Bible of Martin Luther King Jr., knowing that just 50 short years ago, that Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and said, "I have a dream." When there were so many people who voted for him last year, 4 years ago, couldn't even register to vote.
You mentioned the fact that you traveled with Dr. King. You saw him using that very Bible that President Obama used to put his hand on to take the oath right now. Can you give us some recollections, any anecdotes about being with Dr. King while he was using that same Bible?
Well, Dr. King used the Bible to get a message of hope, to be inspired, to have the courage to stand up and preach the gospel like he did on August 28, 1963, 50 years ago. He had the ability to turn those steps then by reading that Bible, turn those steps into a modern-day pulpit. It gave him the courage to walk from Selma to Montgomery, to move through the streets of Atlanta and the dusty roads of Georgia and Mississippi, and to go to Tennessee.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us, and you know,
well,
especially on this very special day for the inauguration and Martin Luther King holiday. Back to you, Anderson.
Dana, thanks very much. And again, Van Jones, I mean, just to underscore it, for him to reference Stonewall in the same sentence as Selma and Seneca Falls is extraordinary, because it's essentially saying which is a controversial statement, that the fight for equal rights for gay and lesbian Americans is a fight for civil rights. And among some people in this country, that they do not hold that viewpoint.
Well, that argument has now been settled. Argument has been settled. It is a civil rights question, but all love is equal. And when you have both the President of the United States say, and to put it on that same platform, but you just heard John Lewis. That was the last living human being who spoke on that stage 50 years ago, John Lewis. And he just said it's a civil rights issue. And so that question now is settled as far as I'm concerned. Well, it's a moment in history.
Let's check in with the reaction of the crowd. Don Lemon is out there. Don, what are you hearing from people?
Yeah, Anderson, you guys are exactly right. John Lewis, of course, from Georgia. I live in Georgia. I see John Lewis all the time, a big proponent for gay rights. He believes it's a civil right, especially same-sex marriage. He came out for it and says it all the time. And people here, there are gay people who are out on the mall. We're very proud. Some people were surprised in a good way that the president mentioned gay rights in his speech. Reggie was one of them. Greg is here as well. Both of them are gay Americans. When the president mentioned gay rights and mentioned Stonewall, what did you think?
Thought it was good that it was inclusive like that.
Yeah. Were you surprised? Did you ever think in your lifetime that a president would mention that in an inaugural address?
It's a little bit surprising, but given his history, the Obama administration's history with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and also his evolution of gay marriage, it's really not surprising.
And what about for you, Greg? You specifically mentioned Stonewall. You thought that was a bit of a surprise for you. Do you like that?
Yeah, I was very surprised when he was talking about different civil rights eras that he mentioned Stonewall, because it's just something that you're not used to hearing when they talk about civil rights, especially from a president. So that really struck me when he said that.
What do you think this does for gay people, not only in this country but around the world?
I hope it pushes us forward and makes us more equal with everyone else, included with everyone else in the country.
Do you feel an additional sense of pride having heard the president mention that today?
Yes, I do. I really do. And it makes me feel good to be an American right now and think that things are going to be better in the future.
Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks to all of the students here who are from Kentucky who stood around and waited to be on television. I'm going to put it back to you, Anderson.
I appreciate it, my friend.
Don, thanks very much. Alex Castellanos, again, for you, it really was a speech about equality, you were saying.
I think speeches are not only spoken, they're lived. And to see a black man stand in front of his nation's capital today and for the second time take the oath of office and then say, remind us of the most evidence of truths that all of us are created equal, that doesn't happen everywhere in the world. What a powerful moment. But, there are two ways to lead people. One way is a John F. Kennedy-style speech saying, let's all of us go to the moon together. Let's all of us go on a great mission. He didn't give that speech today.
Dana Bash has former President Jimmy Carter. Dana?
That's right. Mr. President, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here. What are your first and initial reactions to President Obama's speech?
Well, it was a very progressive speech, and I think it outlined some of the things that need to be done this next 4 years, and I don't have any doubt that now he'll be much more attentive to those things than he could be during the first 4 years. I was really impressed with the inauguration's diversity. The wide range of kinds of presentations for the prayers, for the songs. This was also very impressive. And I think there was just kind of a good spirit today, not of excitement like there was 4 years ago when I was also here, not of excitement like I was here when it was 6 degrees and I was sworn in, but I think there was an element of anticipation of a more stable and progressive and I think more productive administration during this next 4 years. And I believe that there's going to be some immediate movement, for instance, on a long overdue bill to deal with immigration and maybe also some elements of gun control, not very much.
My understanding covering the White House is there is kind of a secret society of presidents and former presidents who are living. How often do you talk to President Obama?
Not very often to him, but I've been very close to the Secretary of State, Clinton. And usually when the Carter Center has programs in 70 countries around the world, 35 of them in Africa. So most of the things that we do don't relate as much to the White House as they do to the State Department. So I've stayed in constant contact with Secretary Clinton, and but not very much with the White House. But maybe this next year will be more
Sir, hindsight is always 20/20. President Obama is a Democratic president that got a chance you didn't get, which is the second term.
Sure.
Looking back, what would you have liked to have done, or maybe even let's look forward? What do you hope that President Obama can achieve that you didn't have an opportunity to because you had one term?
Well, when I left the White House, there was peace between Israel and Egypt. There was a pledge of peace between Israel and the Palestinians, and that issue has now gone into the back drawer. And my hope is it'll be resurrected and we can move and have peace for Israel, which has been one of my prayers for more than 30 years.